Welcome back. I am so excited. Today, I have Kayla Wonisch on the podcast with me today. She's actually been on the podcast once before, and I will link in the show notes for that episode so that you can hear all about her healing journey. However, there was a lot that we didn't talk about that day. And for context, in case you missed that episode, Kayla and I met in, was it 2014?
No,
2015?
2017. I think it was
17.
2017.
Wow, I thought I
Yes.
knew you longer.
I was
Okay,
like,
20.
no, because I was like a year out of high school in 2014.
Oh, okay. No, definitely not 2014. So 2017 through a mutual colleague, and we have stayed in touch ever since. And she is actually the yoga teacher that I bring to all of my Bravecation retreats. Now, I just want to brag on her for a few minutes because she's not going to brag on herself. So here we go. Kayla is a 500-hour certified yoga teacher, but she's not just a yoga teacher, she's also a yoga leader, meaning that she's a yoga teacher for others who are in training to become yoga teachers. She's also a certified meditation teacher, a licensed human element practitioner, a life coach and executive coach, and a former Lululemon ambassador. I am just like smiling ear to ear because I get to be friends with you. And I'm like, oh my goodness, just so freaking impressed with your transformation. Everybody listening, if you haven't listened to the first episode, make sure that you listen to that one because you will see how far Kayla has come. It's really, really impressive. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of context in that other episode.
A lot
And
of
thank you,
context.
Stephanie, for the warm introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. So today I was thinking that we would focus more on the part of your journey that includes yoga and meditation.
Of
I'm
course.
curious, how has it played a role in your own healing?
Yeah, the only way I could answer that, and I'm actually really happy because I went to a class last night and it was one of my favorite instructors' last classes. So one of the instructors that I saw predominantly when I first started going into yoga and really was foundational in my yoga journey. And she said, yoga is a keystone. And then she explained what she meant by that. And she's like, so a keystone is like you need a tortilla before you make the burrito, right? It's a
Yeah.
keystone. And
Yes.
so yoga was the keystone to her success, to everything that's gone on in her life that has brought her
Mm.
what she wanted. And I was like, it resonated so much because yoga has been the catalyst and the keystone to so many benefits that have happened in my life. And it's really because in my earliest days of yoga, I really learned about the concept of who you are on your mat is who you are everywhere, which used to piss me off. I was like, I was judging myself. Like I was just like, how dare you? Like I didn't even know what I was making that mean about myself. But one day it shifted, the meaning shifted, and it was like, oh, that means that anything, literally anything I want to shift about myself, anything I want to shift about my mindset, anything I want to be, I actually get to practice right here on the four corners of my mat. And it's a safe place to practice. And that's why it's called a
Okay.
yoga practice.
I
And so that
have
fit.
full body goosebumps. I don't know why I got teary eyed hearing that. Okay, let me make sure I got this. Who you are on the mat is who you are in life. Is that right?
Mhm. Yeah, who you are
Yeah.
on the mat is who you are everywhere. Right. And
Who you
so,
are everywhere. Yes.
and how that showed up for me, and especially back in, it was around the same time I met you back in 2017, it would show up in, there was something I really wanted, right? That's why I'm signing up for like a 90-minute heated power core class. Like there was something,
Yes.
cognitively that, my prefrontal cortex wants when I sign up for that, which is likely, to look a certain way or to feel a certain way or to have a certain, accolade, even though that's like at the top. Or
Yeah.
at the surface, I mean. And so even with that surface level understanding of like, oh, I'm going in this class to achieve this goal,
Mhm.
I found myself stealing from myself, right? And so,
Mm.
could I stay in that plank a half second longer? Maybe. I don't know, maybe, right? Or could I try this thing I haven't done before? Or do I actually need a block, right? So all of these little things that started to come in that actually related to who I was in the real world. And so I started to notice that there were moments where I wasn't necessarily tired, but didn't want to get into a pose. And so I'd find something else to do. It's time to
Hmm.
put my ponytail, it's time to drink water. Actually, it's time to actually get up completely and go refill my half-filled water bottle. Like I'm not out of water, right? And so it kind of shined a light on how much I choose to procrastinate, or how quickly I can procrastinate when things get
Yeah.
tough. So that was a really big learning. And I think the other one was my relationship with support. And so the blocks are a really salient example of relationship with support. Am I willing to grab support at the beginning of class? And even if I don't know that I need support, I know it's mind blowing.
I don't think I've ever used a block before.
One that doesn't use a block just went, fuck.
Gosh, like goosebumps everywhere again. This is so good. Okay, keep going. I'm sorry. My jaw dropped when you said that.
No, I'm so excited because like this is what yoga brought for me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. Yoga is everywhere. And yoga really, to bring in some of like the history of it, the word really just means to bring together.
Yeah.
Right. And so in a yoga studio, that's bringing yourself together with other humans, it's bringing energy together, if you will, but it's also bringing you together with yourself. And what's
Yes.
really cool about that is yoga, especially the yoga I practice. And so if it's not clear, I do prefer and practice hot power yoga. And part of the reason for that is I like to joke, it gives your body like kind of everything that you don't need in your body, it gives it a space to go. So
Mm,
if all you did was go to a yoga class and sweat and then like leave halfway because you had to use the bathroom, that is absolutely what your body needed to do that day. It removes you of impurities, right? And so that's what really started to kind of get me into the room, like this whole removal of stuff. But then I started to shed so much more that was not serving me, and
yeah.
including mindsets, including self-limiting beliefs. And yeah, I could do a
Yeah.
whole podcast on me doing a handstand alone and what it did for my self-confidence, right? Just
Can we
because
dive into that? Honestly, in this moment, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I need to pick up yoga. Hello. Wow.
yeah, so really on the topic of like who you are on your mat is who you are everywhere, and being able to really practice
Yeah.
who you want to be on this space. I realized it was a really fun example. Basically, a class is about 60 minutes long, and for about 40 minutes of that class, if you're in a power style, you're doing things such as planks and down dogs and chaturanga, which is a halfway push up. And so a lot of things that actually hold and support a lot of your body weight. And so technically, if you can make it for, I guess, 80% of that with holding all of the down dogs, you have the physical strength to do a handstand, right? You have the physical strength to hold
Mm,
your own body up. However, there's a lot of other things going on when you're going into a handstand outside of your physical strength. It is your prefrontal cortex not wanting to be upside down, completely reasonable, completely
yeah.
reasonable request of your body. It has done most things standing on its feet for so long. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of a shift to tell your brain, like, hey, no, we're going to stand up here, upside down, and everything's completely okay for a few
Yeah.
seconds. The brain doesn't like that. But there's also the amount of trust that needs to go into catching yourself once you're up there. So you
Mm,
have the evolution fight of your body doesn't even want to be upside down right now, especially because you probably haven't done it since you were 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a part of your brain
yeah.
that's like, we don't do that. Children do that. I'm not a child. I must be serious and be up straight, or whatever our brain is telling us to be. But then there's also the trusting myself, and we call it jokingly like our bravery muscles. How brave am I? Which I love. You know how much I love the word
Yeah.
brave, how much you love the
Yes.
word brave, but how brave am I to really literally leap into my own power and support myself?
Oh
Because
my
it's a
gosh.
really big cognitive shift.
I think I just needed to hear all of this today. This is just really, really hitting and resonating and ah, I'm so happy. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going.
No, I'm so glad that it makes me really happy to hear, because these are the stories I try to share as a yoga teacher.
Yeah.
I used to say, and I've kind of veered off saying this, but I am not technically the best yoga teacher. If you come to yoga for knowledge of the muscles or, understanding maybe Chinese meridian lines or how energy flows through the body, that's not why people come to my classes. I'm convinced people come to my classes because they like who they are in my presence, but they like
Mm,
who they are in my presence because I'm trying to share what I think is just the human experience. It
mhm.
is just, we're all swimming in this. And if we don't stop for just a moment to
Yeah.
one check in, to look under the hood just to make sure the car's running, like if you never go change your oil, the car is going to blow up.
Bad
Trust
things
me.
happen. Yeah. My sister made that mistake, or maybe it was my mom. I can't remember.
Most parents, apparently transmission fluid is a big thing. I don't know if that's a sign for anyone. Just go ahead and get that checked out. But the same is true about your body. If you're not going in and checking in, one, the physical check-in, how am I feeling? How is my body
Mm,
feeling? Can I hold this? Oh, this is different than yesterday. This place is sore, right? Like the actual physical practice. And the between the ears practice. What does my body
mhm.
do when I'm in plank for 3 minutes?
Yeah.
She's mad then,
She
right?
freaks out. No.
Um, exactly, she freaks out. And and I make this example in yoga all the time. It's really easy to be self-accepting, to be self-loving, and to really care about yourself in child's pose.
Mm,
However, life is so much more like plank, and life is so much more like chair pose, and life is so
yes.
much more like eagle, where your arms are blocking your vision and you're sweating and you're in a chair. Like life is so much more like that than it is
Yes.
child's pose. So how do you treat yourself when you're like that? When you're in the chair, when you're in the
Mhm.
plank, when it's 45 minutes into a 60-minute class and you're like, wait, I thought I signed up for half and half, not full power. Like, right? Like, how do you treat yourself in all of these moments?
Yeah.
Because it gives you like choice and permission to treat yourself differently
Mm,
right
yeah.
there in that.
So, so beautiful. I had a flashback to my first workout after having Annabella, my
Mm,
first baby. I worked out my entire pregnancy, like literally right up to the end. And at the time I was going to burn boot camp. I freaking loved it. And I took 8 weeks off of working out and then I went back and it was so hard. I ended up in tears. And I think
yeah.
I was not only shocked just because it had only been 8 weeks and I worked out the entire pregnancy, but also just disappointed, I think, with my
Yeah.
body, not understanding that even though I worked out while pregnant, it's very, very different. And, anyways, I don't
Mhm.
know. That just like flashed into my head as you were describing it because now it's been 6.5 years. So I can't remember what I was saying to myself, but I'm sure that there was negative self talk there.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's so easy to fall into the trap of I think there's positive comparison to oneself, right? I feel like maybe the only
Yeah.
comparison I can do is to myself and my past self. However, like what is, and this is, definitely work I've learned from you, is like what is the weight I am putting on that difference or that
Yeah.
valence,
Yeah.
right? Because I can look at where I am now and where I used to be as evidence that I have failed.
Mhm.
Or I can look at that as evidence of like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense based on the things that have happened in that period. And this is where I am right now. And this is where
Yeah.
I'm going to go, rather than making it double hard because you're already doing the
Yes.
physical exertion, you're already working out, you're already doing something that is like, I think like counterintuitive for evolutionary purposes. Like it doesn't make sense to our brain to exert excess energy
Mm.
to work out, because it's like, well, what if we have to run from a bear later? Like we don't know.
Right?
Like, your body actually wants to contain as much energy as possible.
Yeah.
And so all of these things are working against you. And then on top of it, you're like, you suck. It's like you're telling yourself that you're awful the whole time. And so it's like, of
Yeah.
course you have to work out.
Oh my goodness, it's so true. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. Anything else on how yoga or meditation have played a role in your healing?
Yeah, I think absolutely, I could go on for days, but I really think the biggest thing I took from it was learning how to trust myself
Yeah.
and then taking that superpower and applying it to everything that I do. Um,
Mm.
and I think another thing that really changed my perspective of not only myself, but the world around me is, I might have talked about this in our last episode too. I hope
That's
I did,
okay.
but there's
Yeah.
this idea in the that I remember learning from a previous teacher around we're almost like all humans are almost like the string of Christmas lights.
Mm.
And so if the light turns off next to you, right, your light's off. That's just kind of how
Yeah.
Christmas lights work. And yoga just kind of screws that light back on. And so now your
Mm.
light is on, which means the lights around you are more likely to turn on. And at first I thought that was like so yoga and cliche and just like, bleh, right? Then I really thought about it. And when you go to a place to fully let it all out, say you are allowed, and it doesn't have to be yoga, but any place where you're able to exert your energy and actually flush out and recharge, you actually are making the world a better place because
Mhm.
it is
Right.
one less person you honk at. It
Mhm.
is one less partner that you snap at, maybe in a
Mhm.
like a squiggly liney or orange dotted, leaking out of the sides way.
Yeah.
It's one more breath you take before responding to a situation. And so it actually does make the world a better
It
place. Like when
trickles out.
it trickles
Yes.
out and it makes, if you live in Florida, it makes I-4 a better place. And um, and I think the there was definitely the light thing I wanted to say. But I think it's really the small hinges swing
Mm.
big doors. So we think these
Mm.
huge things need to happen. Oh, if I can change my whole life
Yeah.
if I just do this huge swing, which is maybe true. But
Yeah.
you could also swing right back, right? And so some of the biggest shifts are actually made from the little teeny things that we do every single day,
That is
including
so important.
it's so
Yes.
important because it's like, oh, I don't have to do this big thing. I can just like breathe
Yeah.
for 20 minutes a day,
Yes.
or I can pay attention to myself for 20 minutes a day. And the compounding interest, the compounding effects of doing that thing is astronomical. Astronomical. I'm in
Yes.
a
Oh my
completely different
gosh.
place 7 or 8 years later.
Yeah, yeah. Every now and then someone will come into my program and they will feel so much pressure to master all of it. And I'm like, to be completely honest, if you go to module 3 and you just focus on that defense
Hmm.
mechanisms, your entire life will change.
Yeah.
Just the one thing. And so I really love the saying that you use, small hinges swing big doors, because it can
Hmm.
feel so easy to think, oh no, I've got to master all this and all this and all this. And it's like, actually, it's just really often just a little tweak that
Hmm.
changes
A
your
little nudge.
whole life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or a little just glancing at it a different way. And that's
Mhm.
been a huge thing. Because if that is true on my mat, then that
Yeah.
must be true everywhere.
Yes. Yes. I also love that you brought up self-trust. I had not ever thought about yoga or any other like working out and correlating that with self-trust. That's one of the big things that I talk about in my ditching anxiety training, because, and I share 10 signs that people do not trust themselves, because that used to be me,
Hmm.
that I didn't. And most people have no idea that the opposite of anxiety is trust.
Yes.
They think the
Yes.
opposite of anxiety is calm, but
Hmm.
it's trust. Yeah. So I
Yes.
just love that you brought that up.
I love that. I actually have two things to add on to that. Especially with trust specifically in yoga and power yoga, and also any form of fitness actually that engages your core, right? Because
Mm,
core is your second brain. They're actually saying that it might have been our first brain. I know you're the psychologist, but I was reading that recently.
really?
Like if you look in a long enough evolution, like technically the stomach would have had to develop first. So it's like our oldest brain. And I was like,
Mm,
oh, I'd be really
yeah.
interested to learn about that. But it's like your
Yeah.
guts or your brain. Your brain and your guts are
Yeah.
sending messages back and forth to each
Yes.
other all the time. So the degree that I can physically strengthen the
Mm,
surrounding support areas of the area that is associated with trusting myself. No,
Mm.
call me a hippie, I'm just gonna go see if it works, right? And so, you know, trust is really like your solar plexus or your guts, your trusting yourself muscles, which are the same muscles that need to be engaged to get into a handstand, to hold a plank, to
Yeah.
trust yourself, right? And so it
Yes.
kind of becomes this I personally don't know, and you probably know about my tattoo on my arm. This is I do not know, I will not know.
Mm-hmm.
I do not know if the correlation between my core and solar plexus chakra and trust is 100% scientifically sound. I do not know.
Yeah.
And it is useful for me and the lens
Yeah.
that I've adopted through this world to believe so, because I've seen the benefits of thinking it does. I've seen the benefits
Exactly.
really meditating on my guts and trusting myself, and then seeing it ripple out not only in physical shape, like not only in developing core muscles, but also in developing skills that imply that I trust myself.
I couldn't agree with that more. I bring that up, especially in my subconscious reprogramming
Mm-hmm.
content and sessions with clients. Like, do I know without a shadow of a doubt that every single thing that I'm about to say is like scientifically 100%? No, not necessarily. And what I have seen is that it
Mm-hmm.
makes profound shifts for people. So kind of who cares? Now,
Right. If
not
it works,
everybody agree, not everybody listening may agree with that. And
yeah.
if you listening are thinking, that sounds weird. I don't know about that. I probably would have agreed with you before I started my inner work journey or early on that
Oh yeah.
it needs to be proven and right and this and that. And the more that I've gotten into it, the the less that matters. If this makes a shift for me and this changes my life and this changes the way that I think and I feel and the way that I show up, who
Mm-hmm.
cares?
Right. Right. And it's really only going to be my own judgment of the thing that stops it from being beneficial to me. And so if that's true, then let's go off and try it, right?
Exactly, exactly. I'm going to cut that there because I could say so much more on that note, but I want to stay focused on you. I am curious.
Hmm.
What are and maybe you already covered this, but what are some things that you wish people knew about yoga or meditation?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I wish people knew is that it is as hard as you make it.
Mm,
It is, and so I'll say a couple of things too. I think probably if you're wanting to start a yoga journey, the story in my head is the most daunting part is finding a studio or finding community,
yeah,
because there is a trope. There is a kind of like I knew I did not know what I was getting into, and I'll talk really quickly about my introduction to actually getting into a yoga studio.
yeah,
I was in a workshop, and it was like one of the checking questions, like, what's something you really want and you haven't gone for? And when I tell you I was having like visions of being in a hot yoga studio, and I had never been in one, but just the idea of being like hot
yeah.
and stretching, I was like, that makes sense to my brain. Like I was very interested in this. I had heard about it, and I was like, I had heard about yoga, and I was like, yeah, 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 cool. My dad did yoga. He had tried to get me into it a bunch of times. I was like, yeah, 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 cool. But then I heard about this like hot yoga thing, and I was like, ooh, I like to be
This
hot.
sounds right.
Yeah, let me look into this. And so a workshop participant that was with me, he was probably like a few years, 10 years older than me. Well, he's like, well, what's stopping you? And I was like, well, they're just so expensive, obviously. Like I can't afford, I think it was like back then, $80 a month for a membership. And he's just like nodding along, and he's listening, and I'm like talking about how expensive it is. And so by the time our conversation ends, he had Venmoed me the amount of one
Oh,
month, and I
oh,
realized in that moment, it was not the cost. I was terrified. And now I was like, I have this $100 that someone gifted to me
yeah,
that now I have to go use to go to the yoga studio. I was so scared. And it made me realize, oh, it was never about the money.
yeah,
I could find $80. I could find $40 or whatever that intro fee was. I really
yeah,
could have found it in somewhere, if I
yeah.
really looked. I was so afraid of walking through the doors. I didn't know what to expect. And so
Like the
that can be
uncertainty.
Yeah, like the uncertainty and the not trusting myself and not trusting,
Yeah.
not even knowing what I didn't know about yoga, like what's going to happen when they say a pose and I don't know what it is. Guess what? Nothing
Oh,
happens. You just look around the room, just fine. But
you just follow
it's like
everybody else.
that first hurdle is literally just taking the jump. It's just going into the studio, or it is my first, even before I hit a studio, was just doing it by myself for 5 minutes a day was the goal I set for 90
Mm,
days. I was like, just see what happens. Let's see what happens if you try this thing for 5 minutes a day for 30
yeah.
days. And it was 30, then it was 60, then it was 90, and then eventually I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to like go inside.
Yes.
um it was a huge shift, but it took me really, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the studio, it wasn't the
No.
community. The first yoga community that I went to wasn't even the yoga community that I stayed with. No bad blood, just you find your tribe, your vibe attracts your tribe. And
Hmm.
so if yoga is something that is really interesting to you, really getting clear with yourself on like what is getting in the way of me making this decision? And it's
Mm,
okay if you're afraid to go somewhere new, and it's okay if it's uncertain. And
yeah.
those are the things you can actually tell your first yoga teacher, because they get it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
understand.
You're my favorite yoga teacher. I have not been to a ton of yoga, probably outside of you. I've interacted with 5 to 7, maybe slightly more yoga teachers. And my brain just always goes back to you because no one else that I've interacted with has facilitated the type of sessions that you do and integrated, the self-acceptance and the negative self-talk and the appreciation for, even, this is going to sound weird, but if you've been to Bravecation, this may ring a bell, appreciation for even your toes. There's
Mm-hmm.
a different vibe with you in a yoga session than anybody else that I've interacted with. So I just want you to know that, I mean, you're special. You are. And I'm
Thank you.
so glad you kept having those visions and that you got that $80 and ended up doing it.
It was a life-changing moment. And what's
Yeah.
funny is in my first class ever, there was a cute, I still remember, cute little 6-year-old girl. And so the teacher set me up next to the 6-year-old and her mom. And the yoga teacher, she was probably like in her 60s or 70s, and she was so funny and so welcoming, and had said something to the effect to the little girl that was 6. She was like, "Oh, you're as old as you are as the first day you start yoga, so you're going to be in pretty good shape." And then the yoga teacher herself was like, and I'm still 24. And that was the age I was when I went in there. And so it just kind
Yeah.
of like solidified, like, hey, you're in the right place. You can start this at any time. You can start this at 6. You can start this at 24. You can start this at 70. Um, and you're gonna see amazing results.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so if somebody is like totally new to this, maybe they've
Yeah.
just written off yoga for years, where should they start?
Yeah, I would start with well, whatever is sore on your body, finding a
Yeah.
little like stretches for yourself there. Because that's really the first step, is finding your own desire and need for it, the catalyst in which to go. If the catalyst is like, I want to be able to stretch, or I want to have more energy when I get out of bed in the morning,
Mm,
or my back hurts all of the
mm,
time, right?
yeah.
If you have something, start there, because we all have things. And find what works for you, because I wish there was a blanket solution, right? And I know what worked for me was setting a really small achievable goal. I
Yeah.
actually did a method that I learned that instead of a SMART goal,
Yeah.
it's an aim SMART goal. And
Okay.
so the aim sets for, like, the A is acceptable minimum. Like, what's my acceptable minimum? Like,
Mm,
I still get a sticker if I do
yeah.
it.
Yes.
What's my ideal,
Mm,
right? And then what's my middle ground? And so, like, for me, even at this stage, 7 years into my yoga journey, my acceptable minimum is still 5 minutes a day. And I still get a brownie point or a gold star or like words of
yes.
encouragement for doing that 5 minutes. My ideal is going to the hot power studio and doing a
Yeah.
sweaty, 60-minute class 5 days a week. And my middle ground is that if I could hit that studio 3 times a week, still a win. So
Killing it. Yeah.
all of those are wins. And so you get to categorize your wins. You get to set the parameters in which you play. And
Mm.
then you get to hit those goals, right? And
Hmm.
so it can be this kind of miseducation of, oh, I'm just not devoted enough, or I'm not, what's the other word I hear a lot? Like there's devotion, but there's just also like just having like the drive for it. And it's like, yeah, you want to be devoted
Yeah.
to your thing, you want to have the drive, but you also get to set the parameters.
You get to
So
choose.
you get to choose. And so if you can't hit your parameters, you get to reset them, right? And
Change
then you
them.
choose if you're going to beat yourself up over them, if you're going to make this double hard on yourself, or if you're just going to keep trekking. So my first big step is really figure out what your parameters are. Like, what is
Mm.
my ideal? Like what would I like just really be blown away if I did? What's my acceptable minimum? What's my middle? And then, how am I willing to treat and reward myself along the way? I really think of a concept that I knew, or I believe you teach too, is around taking credit. You
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
you get to take credit for each of those actions.
Yeah.
And I also did in early days, I'm also ADHD, so this helped me a lot. My earliest days of trying, I actually printed out a physical analog like calendar, and I
Yeah.
wrote them across the top, and I wrote my aim on it, like what the acceptable minimum, what the ideal, what the middle ground was.
Yeah.
And I was allowed to cross off an X every single time I hit one of those and cross. And then I got to see my progress. No tracking apps, no yoga apps, like just you and a piece of paper.
Yeah. I
print
love
it, print
that.
it on your desk, put it on your floor. If you have a yoga mat at home, put it next to the yoga mat. But
Hmm.
really rewarding yourself, taking
Hmm.
credit each time you do take that step. Because I do think building the habit is usually the most challenging part, as with anything.
Hmm.
All of these tips, by the way, they do apply to yoga. They apply to everything else in your life.
Everything else in your life.
Yoga is
Exactly.
everything else that you do.
Yeah.
But really, really starting there, and then it's self-acceptance. It's being gentle with yourself
Yeah.
as you go. If you meet a teacher that you're not vibing with, don't make that about you, and don't make that about that person. Just keep
Find somebody
accepting
else.
on, and keep finding, what your vibe is, and you'll attract your tribe of people if yoga is the route that you want to go.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Is there anything else that you want listeners to know about yoga or meditation, or your journey, things you wish you knew? Anything else coming up?
Yeah, one thing coming up is, I guess a question that was asked to me 2 weeks ago that I've been thinking about since, around meditation, versus yoga, kind of.
Yeah.
And or someone asked me, was yoga the game changer, or was meditation the game changer for you? Like, did you start to
Mm,
see everything in your life shift once you meditate? And I felt like my answer should have been yes. Like, I was like, yeah. And then I found myself like really thinking back to the journey, and when I started meditation versus when I started yoga. Um, and I was like, showing up for myself was the game changer. Meditation was a vehicle, yoga was a vehicle. But what they both provide, and this is an oversimplification of meditation, but what they both provide is an anchor. And an
mm,
anchor, or in the sutras, it calls like you're very familiar with it, the chattering in your mind.
yeah.
So it's calming
Yeah.
of the chattering of the mind. And really, in order to calm this chatter, this chittavritti that's in our brain, um, we need something to focus on. We need some sort of anchor or mantra. And so yoga, as we hear about it, we think about the poses. We think
Yeah.
about like the up dog, the down dog. Um, but like I said at the beginning of the podcast, yoga just means to come together. There are many limbs of yoga, and the one that we associate with like yoga is the poses. That's just one form. That's asana, right?
Mhm.
And so you can practice this practice of self-discovery through asana, through movement. You can also practice it through breath. You can also practice it through focus. All of these things are different limbs or arms for really understanding how to connect back with yourself. And so,
Mhm.
was it yoga? Was it meditation? Are they the same thing? Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's again back to what I said around figuring out your frame. It's figuring out what you want from it and
Mhm.
then giving yourself those, you know, those little, I keep calling them gold stars. That's what they are. Those little stars
Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time you hit it because you're worthy. You're
Yeah.
worthy of the credit and you're worthy of taking care of yourself. And one of my favorite things to say too is like, there is no secret. We were just talking about this before we hit record.
Yeah.
Our computers and our phones, there is no secret that at the end of the day, we have to charge those devices. And then
Mhm.
every once in a while, we need a system update or a reboot, or like when you call like tech support for literally anything, they're like, well, did you clear your cache?
Yeah.
Right? Did you turn it off and turn it back on again?
Yeah.
And that is what yoga and meditation provide to you as the software
Mm.
that is running through this life. It clears your cache, it
Yes, I
turns it
love
back
that.
off, and it turns it back on again, and it makes sure
Yeah.
that all systems are firing before you run into your meeting, your life, your kids, your anything.
That is so beautiful. I feel like I'm gonna start using that phrase. Did you clear your cache?
Did you clear your
Did you
cache?
reboot?
Like, come
Yeah,
on.
and I love that you said the thing that changed everything for you was showing up for yourself. I usually use the phrase honoring yourself, and I think that confuses people. Sometimes they're like, "What does honoring yourself mean?"
Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I've got episodes about that, so I'm not going to dive into it right this moment. Check those episodes out. But yeah, these are just the vehicles, and it's really shifting how you are treating yourself and what are
Mhm.
you listening to that inner guidance and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
And movement and your breath is free. Free 99. Free dollars. And nothing
Yes,
in this life is as free as our breath. And
that is
so,
true.
if you don't know where to start with your breath and
Mhm.
start with moving your body.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on today. This was better than I anticipated, and I knew it was going to be good. Oh, thank you for coming. Now, I'm sure there's women listening who want to connect with you, who might want to reach out and ask questions. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to me directly, you can find me at Kayla Wonisch on Instagram. I'm actually at Kayla Wonisch on everything because there's no other Kayla Wonishes. So if you really want to find me, you can. And if you are local to the Orlando area and you're actually interested in going to one of my classes, I've taught every Saturday class at 9 a.m. for the past 2 years. I don't think that's going anywhere anytime soon. So you can find me at Warrior One at Baldwin Park. And then if you're like, oh, that sounds super interesting and I need to find that address, just reach out to me or stuff and we can find that for you. Love to teach you some yoga.
Yes, thank you.